Just this year, we were the first state in the country to set a terror-free investment option for state employees. And I worked on it with my colleague Carl Domino, who is certainly well-versed in those areas. But this will give, in addition to divesting our state pension funds, this will now give state employees the opportunity so that when they invest their retirement funds, they can do it in a mutual fund or in other opportunities that are devoid of any of those same types of companies. And Florida was the second state in the country to pass what is known as Rachel's Law, otherwise known as defending the state of Florida from libel tourism. Now, many of you might not have heard what libel tourism is, but when you have people like Peter and others who are willing to go out and make these types of tough critiques and, more importantly, tell the truth, they then become subject to lawsuits for libel, not here in the United States where we still are protected by free speech, UK, where judgments against certain authors who have been critical of Saudi Arabia and funders of terrorism have gotten judgments against these authors. And then they try to get those judgments executed here in the United States. New York was the first state, Florida was the second state, and there are going to be more and more states in the coming years that are going to say that if the free speech laws in the country where the libel lawsuit is filed are not as much as what we protect here in the United States, you can't have that judgment entered in the United States. And that is a so fundamental right to free speech in our country. And none of these, because many of them relate to our relationship with the State of Israel, I remind all my Jewish colleagues in the Florida House and the Florida Senate, I remind them every time, Lori, an overwhelming support from our friends in the Christian community. And so we are so grateful to the Christian community. Now, before I conclude, I want to tell you that I've been told recently that the nature of your enemies is the acid test of your character. And so I am proud to tell you that I am the #1 target in the state of Florida for a little group called the Council of American Islamic Relations. And I will tell you why. Because a few months ago, there was something organized in the state capitol in Tallahassee called Muslim Day. And let me just be clear that every Floridian has the right to petition their government and peaceably assemble in their state capitol and advocate on the issues that are important to them in their community. But when the leader of that organization has ties to CARE, which, as many of you know, is a front organization for Hamas and is linked to the Muslim Brotherhood organization, who during the Holy Land Foundation trial, which 5 people just got sentenced to a long time in prison here in the United States, the Muslim Brotherhood declared that their intention was to destroy America from within. And CARE is linked in that entire maze with all these organizations. And this gentleman from Tampa left CARE and started this new organization that sounded very benign called United Voices for America. Now, I'll tell you one thing. You might be able to take someone out of CARE, but you can't take CARE out of someone. This gentleman came to Tallahassee under the auspices of lobbying for education and health care. But we knew better. And we did our best. And I have to thank, I know they're here, Tom Trento. Joe Kaufman is in here, but CJ was there. She was up there every day passing out these flyers. Frank Gaffney, many of you know from the Center for Security Policy, all came to Tallahassee to say the very same thing, which is that this gentleman was part of an organization that is linked to creeping Sharia and stealth jihad in our country. And all we wanted to do was make people aware of that fact. And for that, I was called an Islamophobe and a racist and someone akin to the KKK. Now, I will tell you this. If in this country you do not have the right to free speech, that is the beginning of the end of America as we know it. Now, just a few days later, one of my colleagues, a Democrat from Broward County by the name of Jim Waldman, invited an imam to lead the Florida House of Representatives in prayer. Now, we've had pastors and rabbis and all denominations come and lead the Florida House of Representatives in prayer. But Mr. Waldman, Representative Waldman, wanted to prove a point that we should not invoke the name of Jesus Christ during our prayer. And so he wanted to prove to the Florida House of Representatives that he could be even more offensive than a Christian prayer. And so he invited an imam. And much was made about the fact that I was not on the floor of the Florida House of Representatives during the opening prayer. And it was true. The reason why I wasn't on the floor during the opening prayer was because I was on the phone. Some of you might know Steve Emerson of Investigative Project on Terrorism, and I was on the phone with Joe Kaufman, and I gave them the imam's name. And within 15 minutes, they emailed me back. This same imam had participated in a rally participating in a rally with an unindicted co-conspirator from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and the rally was in support of Sami Al-Arian, who was the professor at the University of South Florida. But that wasn't it, because just a few minutes later, they showed me this imam's website. And the link on this imam's website is to a radical organization that was found in that same terrorism trial to be linked to funding violent jihad and the recruitment of mujahideen. I'm proud I wasn't on the floor to support that imam. And then finally, as if I hadn't done enough to rile them up, Florida Security Council, and many of you in this room are involved with it, and Tom Trento once again hosted Geert Wilders here in the state of Florida for a freedom of speech rally. And I proudly stood next to Geert Wilders and defended his right to free speech to speak out on our soil, unlike the fact that he was banned from going to the UK and being able to show his movie. And so I will tell you this, that what Peter says in his book, we are in a struggle for our civilization. This is a battle with radical Islam, and whatever President Obama reads off of his teleprompter to tell you that we will never be at war with Islam, Islam and radical Islam is at war with us, and not just through violent jihad, but through stealth jihad. And yet we have someone in the White House who is more interested in appeasing our enemies and being tough on our #1 ally in the Middle East, the state of Israel. And so I go back to Ronald Reagan in closing. Ronald Reagan said that there's a historical reluctance to see totalitarian powers for what they are. He said, we saw this phenomenon in the 1930s. We see it too often again today. If history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. And so I noticed and I caught one of the lines in the song, and I believe that I heard it right. And I believe that I heard the line in the song say that people ignored the news.
That's right.
That people ignored the news during the 1930s. Those of you in this room are not ignoring the news.
Right.
But we have friends and neighbors and relatives who are. And that's why what was said is so important, that we need to engage them. We don't need to tell them what to think, but we do need to tell them what to start thinking about. And so Lori said that silence is not an option, and I could not agree more. And so I conclude by leaving you with Isaiah 62:1. For Zion's sake I shall not be silent, for Jerusalem's sake I shall not rest. Thank you all. God bless you.